felt we had a very good first quarter. They controlled the footy a bit in the second and third, and then we had a great last quarter. So, look, that's a bit about the way the game's played now. I mean, it is in a momentum game, definitely. But from our point of view, it was probably give you a good idea where we're at. Our best is really good. And we still need to work really hard as a team to play 4 good quarters of football. So we prefer to be in front, but the result was positive on the weekend. But we've certainly got some areas we've got to work on.
Back-to-back wins. Obviously, you're chasing that this week for the first time in a long time. What would that mean?
Yeah, well, look, every win for this group's important. I think that's why we set ourselves to the NAB Cup to pick a really strong team, because we've got to teach the group to win. You've got to learn how to win. The game, it's a long game. I think I said that 2 years ago when I first arrived. It's a long game for a youngish group. So to be able to keep battling away is really important. So every win builds belief for us as a young footy team. So every win's extremely important.
Do you have to be aware that sort of Essendon sort of building this game up a bit? It's their first home game, they've got to rally before the game and things like that. Is that something you have to be aware of going in?
Look, I think internally every club respects Essendon Footy Club. I mean, it's a lot of external noise about how many games they're going to win and so forth. I mean, we've been there in that situation ourselves. So you prepare for every team's best. It doesn't matter whether there's a milestone game, you're playing at home, you're playing away. It's a big game for them. It's a big game for us. We believe our home venue is the MCG, which it is. But that shouldn't matter. It shouldn't really matter where and when and who you play or what the circumstances are. So that's the sort of team we want to sort of build ourselves into. And they beat us last year, so we need to bounce back and not lose to them 2 games in a row.
What did you make of them in round 1, the Bombers?
Oh, look, I think they're a team that is still trying to find the synergy a bit. They've had guys coming in and out, but they played some good football. The second half was solid, And Gold Coast are a well-respected, good young team. And we saw that on the weekend. They had a lot of injuries last year. So I think John, as he was pretty positive about their second half. I think they'll continue to get better week in, week out. They'll play with each other. Probably, I don't know, it's hard to pick my team, but I suspect they're going to sort of settle on a team for a period of time, which allows them some synergy and allows them to get some good teamwork. But there's some really positive signs in the second half.
On paper, it looks like it should be a win, I guess, for you. How important is it with a younger side not to be too complacent?
Well, I think it's what we got to try and do is prepare ourselves. I think that's the main thing for us this week. Coming off the back of a good win last week, it's really about every session that we do, every time the players are in the footy club, every recovery session, all those sorts of things become really important regardless, because we're still in a sense competing against ourselves. We want to get better each week, and that's the way we'll go into this week against Essendon.
Do you have an update on Oscar McDonald's ankle?
Oh, not really. I'd say it'd be doubtful for this week based on, we have our day off Tuesdays. I'd say when I saw him Monday, he was still on crutches, so I think he'd be pretty doubtful this week.
Lyndon Dunn looks obviously the obvious replacement. Why wasn't he picked for round 1, and do you think he comes straight back in?
Look, we made a really conscious decision to pick a fit team, a really healthy team. I think, as it turned out, it was probably a good decision. We saw the games on the weekend in round 1 are always a bit of a war of attrition, but we did play our guys for 3 weeks. Dunny had that little groin sort of strain early in the game against the Bulldogs, missed the following week. So as much about that, the fitness side of it, as anything. Look, I suppose now you look at the opposition team, and they're not super tall, the Bombers. Danaher's up there, and a lot of sort of small medium. So that's probably the only impediment to a big getting in the team, really, is what the opposition looks like. So, but yeah, look, he was close last week, but it was really, as I said, a conscious decision to pick a pretty fit side going to round 1.
We saw Petraka, Brayshaw, Lumumba last Friday. What's the plans for those 3 this week? Yeah,
they're all a little bit different. Obviously, Christian's sort of first hit out. We want him to get a good month of training before he plays. We'll have a discussion about him today, whether he plays this week in the VFL or next week. We'll decide that probably today or tomorrow. Angus and H was, as I said before about the fitness side of it, we had an opportunity to pick a fit team going in, and we do that again this week. So I think their discussions are still going to be around, H didn't come back to training about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Now, he's a more experienced player, and then Gussie got injured in that first game we saw in the first sort of 4 seconds. So at the moment we're healthy and we're able to pick a healthy team, but certainly those guys come into consideration, and it becomes more about health and touch, and do we feel like that this week's too early or not.
Christian was obviously pretty good in that intra-club. Do you sort of stick to that timeline of getting him 3 or 4 games in the VFL, or you don't change it at all?
Yeah, look, I mean, fitness, as I said, is a big thing. Like we know he's talented. We know he can do pretty special things. We saw that before he did his knee last year. But 90 interchange now, there's nowhere to hide in AFL ground, and all our guys have had a fair bit of work, as I mentioned before. So look, the plan will stay the same, and then once we think he's at a suitable level of fitness, then you start to judge him on his form and whether he can get in the team, and what round that will be will sort of be determined by those 2 factors.
The high scoring around the competition on the weekend, do you think that's what we're going to expect all year, or do you think it's going to balance out a little bit because round 1 can be a bit different? Yeah,
look, it's a bit hard to tell because round 1 is often a little bit different. You do get long periods of pretty fatigued players, which then the ground tends to open up a little bit. Probably round 1's less tactical as well because you're still working on your own team and trying to get your own team up and about. I think a lot of times scoring goes down during the middle of winter, doesn't it? I mean, apart from Etihad, it's raining, it's wet, it's windy, it's cold. I think we see that as a trend, that middle month. So, look, I think we all enjoyed the footy on the weekend. Whether they're going to be 26 goals, the Eagles kicked 26 goals to like 15 or 16. Not sure, but look, the signs are that teams are trying to move the ball a bit quicker and trying to break open defences, but it is sort of 1 week.
Clayton obviously fitted in pretty seamlessly on the weekend. Do you look to give him rest spells during the year, or does he play the 22 games? Yeah,
we learn from young guys every year. Last year we probably ran Angus into the ground a little bit. I mean, it is early days with form, so he's got to keep his form up, Clayton, to stay in the team. But those young guys you look to rest. I think there's a game last year where maybe Gussie was a bit crook. I think he had the flu, and we probably should have pulled him out. So we learned from that. So I would suggest that if Clary's form continues, I still wouldn't think he'd play all games this year.
And how do you look to get Jesse Hogan involved more earlier in the game? Because obviously he came into it late, but pretty well held early. Yeah,
they did really well, pushing their midfielders back and pushing numbers back, and Phil Davis, terrific game. I mean, he read the play really well. Probably a bit about ball use, learning about that when we got some dominance with our inside 50s. Just lowering our eyes a bit. Look, I think we've done it. I think we did it a couple of times last year, but certainly getting him in the midfield helps. Maybe we do that a bit earlier because he is very creative around the ball, so you can see that he can play a number of different roles. I think that got him going in the third, and then we pushed him back deep, and once our ball movement was fast and we started moving out of the centre. So look, there's a number of variations, but the reality is there's going to be periods of time for key forwards where they just go through droughts because of the way oppositions defend, and that's just part of his learning, and that happens to the best forwards in the competition.
What does that say about his character, though? The fact that there's big expectations going into round 1 on him in particular, doesn't really touch it for 3 quarters, then he can have an impact like that in the last quarter.
Yeah, look, it's something that we've been talking a lot about to him because young players do get frustrated. They go from being the best players in the comp to then having to learn their stripes again, and then obviously Jesse wins the Rising Star, and everyone expects him to go to another level again. So I thought it was terrific. We're talking about that all the time. Look, we know it is going to be hard for key forwards if the ball's a little bit slow or teams have fold back defences like perhaps the Giants do. They try to slingshot from defence, and the defence is pretty crowded. So you've got to be pretty spot on with your ball use going forward. But I thought it was terrific tick for him to keep persevering, and in the end, clearly his last quarter was very significant as winning the game.